Welcome to the Girls Marketing Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things marketing and the perfect backing track to your workday. Every week, we get up close and personal with marketers revolutionising the industry so you can learn from the best in the game. From the latest marketing trends to building a successful marketing career, no topic is off limits. At Girls in Marketing, we champion progress, inspire change, and encourage women to take the marketing world by storm. Check out our website and membership to learn more and get involved, as we'd love to welcome you to our inner circle. Right, let's dive into another episode together. Hello and welcome back to the Girls Marketing Podcast. Today is an International Women's Day special, so we're going to be talking all about that. Now, as a team, we have quite a lot of opinions on International Women's Day, so I think it'll be interesting to talk all about it. The theme this year is Inspire Inclusion. So we have some favourite campaigns. What are our favourite campaigns? What have they been in previous years? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, every time I think of International Women's Day, I always think about the Imagine campaign by CPB London, and I tell every single person about it because I think it probably is like my favourite marketing campaign ever because it's so powerful and it really does get you to question your own bias. So for context, it was CPB London's 2022 International Women's Day campaign. It was a campaign that really got you to question that theme of that year. So the theme was about breaking the bias. And yeah, it was about like, imagine a nurse, now is it a woman? Imagine someone leaving the office early to pick up the kids, is it a woman? Imagine like a board director, is it a man? So it really got you to like think about the gender biases in your head. And I just thought that was so powerful. And I literally still remember like when, like, sounds extreme, but like sitting in my car when I first saw it and I thought, wow, like this is so powerful. And CPB London get it like spot on. Like every year they did the Common Words campaign, which was the 2023 one, which was about how the difference in language that is used when speaking about a woman compared to a man. So they were saying like a man gets called assertive and like all these positive adjectives, whereas a woman gets called like bossy and like all them like sort of like negative adjectives. This year they've done one about consent and affirmative consent, about like I'm asking for it, and just like the kind of campaigning to get a petition going all about affirmative consent, which again I think is amazing. And yeah, they just seem to always get it right in that Imagine campaign. Every time I think about it, like I just think it's so powerful. And I think with brands using International Women's Day, obviously we all know like you have to do it right if you're going to do it. And I always think brands who get involved with International Women's Day, the way that they do it needs to be really thought out, because especially as marketers, we're at the forefront of kind of that like social media space. So like, even though a brand might do this amazing campaign, the other actions that they've done might not necessarily reflect on the same values that this campaign is showing. And therefore the social media manager kind of gets the back of it. So we've seen it a lot with like the gender pay gap bot. Like that was an amazing use of Twitter, now X. I'm not sure whether they've done it this year yet or not, or whether they will be doing. But that was amazing. The only thing with that was, again, like I feel like that was brought back on the social media manager to kind of crisis and like manage the crisis, and crisis comes with that. So I feel like, yeah, brands getting involved with International Women's Day is super, super important, but it just needs to reflect within the rest of the year.
Yeah, I agree. I definitely love those campaigns as well. And I think they followed it up really well. I think it was so impactful, that one that they did in 2022. And then the one the following year where it was comparing the language used to describe men versus used to describe women, I think was like really, really powerful. But I agree with you. I think that, you know, on the face of it, I think, you know, International Women's Day existing as a concept is a really important thing. I think it definitely still has a really rightful place and should be celebrated, and should be something that, you know, not only women celebrate, it should be something that is, you know, kind of acknowledged by everyone. It's really important. And I think that brands getting involved with it is fantastic. But provided that it's for the right reasons and that it's not used to kind of push an ulterior agenda, or it's just something that they jump on once a year and it's down to, you know, people to just kind of come up with a creative idea with like the intention of kind of, you know, increasing sales or whatever it is. I don't believe really that these sorts of campaigns should have any other real sort of objectives other than what they are, and that's to kind of adhere to whatever the theme is that year. So inspiring inclusion or breaking a bias or something like that. Obviously, off the back of that, some brands will gain a lot of attention and will do really well. And, you know, that's great if that happens. But I think the intention should be, you know, celebrating women and, you know, kind of making progress. And I think that you mentioned the gender pay gap bot. I think that just really highlights the amount of brands that jump on it just as they would kind of create a Christmas ad. And it's so much more than that. It shouldn't just be a day in the year, a day in the calendar that you just put a bit of a post or a campaign together for and then forget about it. And that's not necessarily the responsibility of the marketing team or the social media team, to make sure that the company is kind of doing things to support women and celebrate women. But I do think that companies really need to think carefully if they are going to participate and make sure they're doing the work behind the scenes to support the women in their organisations or the women who are their customers or their other stakeholders, and make sure that it's not performative. And I think if they can marry those two things up, then yeah, I think I love it as a day.
Do you have that burning desire to create a website for a new idea but don't have any coding experience? Don't worry, I've got you. Hostinger is a sponsor of today's episode, and they have created an AI website builder tool allowing anyone who wants to take their idea online to do so with zero coding skills. Just write 3 sentences to sum up what you're looking for, and Hostinger does the rest. The AI even offers personalised suggestions on layout, design, and content. Bring your new idea to life by heading to hostinger.com/girlsinmarketing and use the exclusive code girlsinmarketing for 10% off your plan. What's stopping you? It's when it's followed up by action, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Like, you know, you can say, oh, this campaign's really good, but if there's nothing underlying, if it's just performative, then it almost kind of feels like pointless, because it's all well and good to say, oh yeah, like we shouldn't be thinking like men are CEOs and like women are bossy and all this sort of thing. But actually, like if there's nothing behind it, like what's the point? That's what I love about the CPB London one from the affirmative consent, because they've got that petition behind it and it's all meant to be like, okay, well, there's purpose in this. It's purposeful marketing. And I think that that's like one of the main reasons that International Women's Day exists, is because we want to create change. We want to be that change. But I think so many brands just see it as like, this is a day for us to look good. So like, how can we look good? But I think there's been a lot of campaigns that have been really interesting over the years. There was one by The Body Shop, who I know are kind of going through a bit of troubles at the moment financially. But they did International Women's Day, it was like International Women's Programme, where it was like a grant for like small businesses, like small female-led businesses. It was really interesting and really nice, because they essentially give like a small pot of money. They had like a big pot and they give like smaller pots out to help women get like their ideas off the ground. And I think that sort of thing, I think that was 2021, is really nice to see. Again, you know, kind of giving women that leg up, and, you know, using International Women's Day as a case study for that.
Yeah, I think a brand that does purposeful marketing and celebrates women all year round really well is Nike. I think Nike are really good at speaking out on social and political issues all the time. And I really like their 2020 campaign, I think it was, which is one day we won't need this day. And it's celebrating the women that have moved sport forward in the hopes that one day, like, the playing field will be level and we won't need International Women's Day. And they included Serena Williams in that, who's like a long-term partner. They've sponsored and supported her since, I think, 2003, which she's had such a long career. And Megan Rapinoe, who's one of the US football players. And I just think Nike, they really hit the mark with it. They celebrate everyone. They've got a really positive tone of voice, but they are impactful and they're not afraid to take a stand and put themselves out there. They did a Dream Crazy campaign a few years ago with Colin Kaepernick after some issues, I think, and a bit of controversy about him taking the knee on the football pitch in America, and they made him the face of his campaign. So I think Nike they just really stand by their values and their mission.
I mean, and I don't know, and obviously I really don't know, so it's just kind of putting a question out there. I love those campaigns as well, but it would be interesting to know what Nike do as an organisation internally for the women who work for them, to support them. I'm not saying one way or another, I absolutely don't know. I'm sure that they probably do back that up, but it would be interesting, wouldn't it, to know kind of what they do kind of behind the scenes to back that up as well, because I agree, I think they always stand out as a real kind of front runner in kind of advocating for women and supporting women, particularly in sport. But it would be interesting to kind of hear from, you know, sort of employees or people behind the scenes and see what they do as well to support women. But yeah, absolutely. I think that their ads are, their campaigns are really always kind of spot on.
Yeah, something I found out last year, which I was a bit disappointed in myself that I didn't already know, is that there's such thing as an equal pay day, which is on the 22nd of November every year. And it's essentially when women start working for free for the rest of the year. Again, like reflecting on the gender pay gap. Obviously, this is like overall, so not just marketing, but essentially women work for free after the 22nd of November. And that's kind of the difference in, I think it puts it in perspective of the gender pay gap then. And I know there's recent research this year that shows, it was by Marketing Week actually, that shows that although the gender pay gap within marketing has decreased, I think it's like by 0 point something percent, that's decreased from 2023. However, still in marketing, the gender pay gap in marketing is still double the average. And I think the average is like 7%. So I think it's like about 15% in marketing, which is just still crazy because I just like, as well as like International Women's Day, I think there's a lot of people out there that still kind of deny that we need stuff like International Women's Day and we need even communities like Girls in Marketing. And I just think when them stats are so big and so significant, I still can't believe that people like just don't think that it's still an issue and still aren't fighting for it to not be an issue anymore. So I think in that case, International Women's Day and like Equal Pay Day are so important. And when people are thinking about how they can kind of bring around change or like make awareness of it, it is just having like starting out having the discussion and bringing up the discussion in the workplace, even though it might be a difficult discussion to have, or even just doing a LinkedIn post about it saying, by the way, today's International Women's Day, like here's what I do to advocate for women, or like today's Equal Pay Day, stuff like that, just starting the conversation. I think it just gets people's minds going and hopefully people listening to this are kind of like thinking the same and like getting involved with International Women's Day on Friday. Because yeah, it's such an important topic.
Hiring my first team member was both exciting and daunting. It marked a shift from being a solo entrepreneur to an employer. And with that shift came new responsibilities, especially understanding the importance of employers' liability insurance. So, what exactly is employers' liability insurance? In simple terms, it's a legal requirement for UK businesses that have employees. This insurance protects your business if an employee gets injured or becomes ill because of the work they do for you. When I hired my first team member, I knew I was responsible for their well-being at work, and that's a big responsibility. Employers' liability insurance was not just a legal necessity, it became my peace of mind, ensuring that my team and my business were protected. Kingsbridge Insurance is a sponsor of today's episode, and they understand the unique challenges that we face when businesses grow. The employer's liability insurance is specifically designed for small businesses and startups. If you're at that exciting stage of hiring your first employee or planning to expand your team, I encourage you to learn more about employer's liability insurance. You can find out more about the packages Kingsbridge offer by visiting their website, kingsbridge.co.uk. Now, let's dive back into the episodes.
And I think one other thing that can be really impactful that brands can do is, rather than necessarily spending loads of money and loads of marketing budget on a campaign, is just kind of being more open and transparent about what they actually are doing. And I think that a lot of people would really kind of see that as a really positive thing to do. I think, like you said, Kira, there is still so much work to be done, and not just around equal pay, although that is a huge thing, but I think the existence of so many groups and, organisations that are campaigning for things, like, for example, something that's quite close to me at the moment, having just had a baby, is things like Careers After Babies, Pregnant Then Screwed, like those sorts of things that are specifically focused on women and their careers after they've had children, and how they're supported by employers in that sense. And I think that something really powerful would be for brands to just kind of speak more openly about what they actually are doing to support and advocate for their women. And I think that, just kind of telling people about the fact that they have, introduced certain policies, or, we acknowledge that we weren't great at this, but now we're doing this to address it. I think that openness and honesty really goes a long way. And so it doesn't always have to be a super clean, polished, put together campaign. Sometimes it can just be being real and raw and honest about what you're doing and starting a conversation conversation, like you say, that can really kind of bring around positive change, like on days like International Women's Day.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen a guy who is like a CEO of a really big company. He did a post recently because they've just changed their maternity policy.
Right.
And the amount of stuff in the comments that was like so bad is horrible. Like, people were saying like, I don't even know how it could be a bad thing. Like, I don't understand from the post. I mean, it was a long post, I'm not gonna lie, but it was just talking about like why they've done it, because they have a lot of women who work for their company. It's quite not a female led company, but it's quite female on the ground. And he was saying, you know, we acknowledge that we didn't have the best policy before, so we've changed it. And this is why, nothing to do with International Women's Day, just because, you know, I think it's having a stance on something. Yeah. And the comments were like quite negative. So it's interesting because I think sometimes brands avoid International Women's Day and, you know, all of these other kind of days like what we've talked about, because they're afraid of the backlash, because they're afraid that either they'll get found out if they're not doing these things behind the scenes, or even just because they don't want to be involved in that. And I think it's so interesting because I speak to a lot of marketers who say, oh, I'd love to do something for International Women's Day, or even another day, any kind of day, but actually like our CEO or someone higher up doesn't want us to, because, you know, it's not really what we're about, or it doesn't align with us. So it's so interesting, because I do get the fact that there could be that backlash there, but I think ultimately days like this are needed if change is going to happen. Because, you know, even when International Women's Day was brought in by like the UN like years ago, I think it was like 1977 or something, even then, you know, so much has changed and evolved, and I think International Women's Day has been a pivotal part in that change. So I think it's just about companies not fearing the potential of, you know, it being a bad thing, because ultimately if you've got, you know, the stats and the stuff to back it up, it's going to be a good thing.
Yeah, because I can understand why with like the gender pay gap bot, why companies would back away from sharing anything about International Women's Day. But the only reason that you would have to fear sharing something is if you know you're not doing the work behind the scenes. So I think if you know that you're doing the work and you know that you're making a change, I think you can kind of get the jump on it, and even acknowledging that, okay, we're still not perfect, but this is what we're doing and we're really trying. I think, like I say, people do appreciate that. But I think that's a universal theme, isn't it, when it comes to, I know we've spoken about this before on the podcast, when it comes to talking about kind of brands sort of being eco-friendly or anything like that, they shy away from those conversations, because I think a lot of the time people want more, and it's always like, yeah, but what are you doing about this? Or it's never enough, so brands just don't talk about it. And I think that can be sort of detrimental to the conversation sometimes. So I think acknowledging that kind of open conversation is important, and brands getting involved is something that we need to encourage for International Women's Day.
And I also feel like in like marketing, I read some research recently, which was, and I think it's like a common stat that like people talk about all the time. I think we spoke about it before, Liv, about like men are still like 4 times as likely to become like marketing director than women. And I just like, with like stats and stuff like that, I just can't believe like it still happens. And it's so disappointing. And the whole research, like there's so much research that you can do, like you can see on like the whole like gender in marketing, or like even like gender differences in the workplace in general. And I think them stats speak for themselves. And yeah, it is really disappointing that so many big companies seem to either one, shy away from International Women's Day because they don't want to get like found out, or they don't want to like have any bad PR. And yeah, too, that like it still happens today. It's just crazy.
I think then, just to kind of round up, you know, obviously International Women's Day is an amazing thing to get involved with, but just make sure if you are, you know, at the front of it as a social media manager, maybe don't take it personally, especially obviously you can advocate and you can be that voice as much as possible. But I think a lot of people that I speak to that are kind of on the ground don't have the say in those higher up organisations. So I'd say anyone who is like a stakeholder or a manager, if you do have a say, you know, advocate for those women. And then if you don't, and you're on the flip side and maybe you don't have the confidence or the ability to physically talk to anyone higher up, don't take it personally if there is backlash from any campaigns. You can only do like your best. And I've, with that gender pay gap, I spoke to quite a lot of people who were the social media managers for those accounts. And it is hard because you work on something and you feel so passionate about it. And, maybe there's backlash around it. So I'd just say, do the best that you can and continue advocating for women and make the most of International Women's Day. And that's a wrap on another team episode. Before you forget, we'd love to make this a two-way conversation. Feel free to share your opinions on this episode with us on social media by tagging Girls in Marketing. If you did enjoy listening to our team chat about marketing, please follow and leave a review of the podcast so we can continue to grow and share more episodes like this one. Your support really does go a long way. We'll be back next week with another amazing episode, but until then, join in the conversation on social media. See you next week.